Welcome back. You're watching World Insight on CCTV News. Exercise Trident Juncture, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization's largest military exercise in over a decade, is now underway. NATO's command center says the major task of the month-long drill is to test its response speed. However, it has caused a lot of concerns elsewhere given the size and the scale of the operation.
A show of force. NATO needs its soldiers to be able to put boots on the ground within days. And the undergoing drill is preparing a new, very rapid response force capable of being fully operational next year. 36,000 alliance soldiers from more than 30 countries are taking part. Operation Trident Juncture will be going on for about a month until the 6th of November. Though NATO says the drill, or any of NATO's military exercises, is not aimed at any country, tensions between NATO and Russia have been escalating since the outbreak of the Ukrainian war. And Russia's recent airstrikes targeting the Islamic State in Syria has also sparked anger among NATO members. Turkey twice accused Russia of flying its bombers into Turkish airspace, a move that Moscow termed was by accident. However, on Tuesday, the NATO Secretary General accused Russia of willfully violating Turkish airspace.
This is a consequence of the increased Russian military presence in Syria. And a minimum requirement is that Russia is able to deconflict with the ongoing coalition fighting ISIL, and also, of course, respect the borders of Turkey, including, of course, the airspace of Turkey, which also is NATO airspace. And for us, this doesn't look as an accident.
Apart from Syria, Russia's role in the Ukraine crisis is another concern for NATO. Before the violation, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President François Hollande had discussed the Ukraine situation. After the meeting, Hollande seemed to suggest that all was not well in dealing with Russia on the issue.
It
is possibly certain now that we need 3 months to organize the election in Ukraine. We will go beyond the date that was scheduled, December 21st of this year. It is an essential step for return to the integrity of Ukraine, that is to say, the total control of the border and the withdrawal of foreign troops.
Fighting between Ukrainian government forces and the separatists in Ukraine's eastern Donetsk and Luhansk regions have killed more than 8,000 people since April last year. The West has accused Russia of backing Ukrainian rebels. This has also increased the number of military drills that both Russia and NATO have frequently been holding in the region. In 2014 alone, NATO held over 200 drills. Some analysts worry that increased drills only increases the risk of armed conflict between Russia and NATO.
And for more on this topic, we're joined here in the Beijing studio by Mr. Xiyu, Senior Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies. Welcome, sir, to our program. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., we're having Mr. Jeffrey Rathke, who is Senior Fellow and the Deputy Director of the European Program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Welcome, sir. And also in London, we are joined by Mr. Lukasz Kulesa, who is a research director of the British think tank European Leadership Network. Welcome to our program, to the three of you gentlemen.
Thank you.
First of all, what should we make of the nature of this specific military exercise? The largest scale, the longest time. Mr. Kulesa, what do you think? Is this about finding Europeans' old identity, or this is about let's reunite it and fight against Russia?
Well, these particular exercises were actually planned month before, so it really is a coincidence that they happened more or less the same time that we have an escalation in Syria involving the Russians. But indeed, these exercises, which are much more potent than previously announced, and a number of other exercises, are supposed to send a message to whom it concerns, to any country that would be interested in violating the borders of the NATO alliance. And the message is that NATO would be militarily prepared and ready to counter such an aggression, be it in the east, be it in the south, or any other direction.
To whom it
and
may
on the Russian side, of course.
to whom it may concern. Of course,
yes, of course. On the Russian side, there is also an intensification of exercises.
Right, indeed. Let me go to you, Mr. Rathke. To whom it may concern? To exactly whom it may concern? Is that Russia and Syria?
Well, I think, first of all, let me pick up on a point made by Mr. Kulesa at the end of his discussion. I think it's important to keep in mind that the bigger picture here is that the exercise NATO is carrying out right now, Trident Juncture, it is the largest NATO exercise in a number of years, but it is dwarfed by Russia's recent military exercises in Europe and especially along Russia's western borders. So I think we need to keep that in mind. And it's in that context that NATO has been increasing its own rapid reaction capabilities. We can't forget that NATO's expansion of the NATO response force, for example, which is being tested in this exercise, only came about after Russia's aggression in Ukraine, including its annexation of sovereign Ukrainian territory in Crimea. That's to say nothing of the actions in eastern Ukraine, where Russia supports separatist rebels, including with equipment and personnel, as well as the 2008 invasion of Georgia, which led to the separation of two territories by Russia from Georgian sovereign territory.
So, Mr. Rathke, you're suggesting that there is a military buildup, in fact, between NATO and also Russia at this moment, at least from the NATO side. Is that what you're trying to suggest?
No, I think you've got this in the wrong order. So what we've seen since the mid-2000s is a Russian military modernization effort, which has led to dramatic increases in expenditure and procurement of modern military equipment. And Russia has shown its readiness to put this equipment and its resources to use, both in Georgia in 2008 and most recently in Crimea in 2013. So I would reject any suggestion that these are mutual steps. NATO is responding to Russia's destabilizing behavior and undermining of the rules that have governed European security since the end of the Second World War.
Mr. Yang, here in Beijing, are we seeing, from your perspective, military competitions going on over there in that part of the region between NATO and Russia? Is Russia still big enough and quote-unquote possible enemy for NATO?
Well, it seems to me that it's an interaction course. I agree with our European colleagues' observations. Say these existing military drills had been planned for months, so it's not targeting at the right now situation. However, if you look at these military drills counter the previous Russia drills, it has been the interaction of military drills showing their muscles. So such interactions, if you put such interactions in the longer term, just like my colleagues in Washington, D.C. pointed out, Russia has increased their military buildups, but meanwhile, at the same time, what we have seen is during the past more than 10 years, U.S. plus NATO has deployed anti-missile systems up to Russia's boundary. So ironically, both Russia and the NATO at the same time feel the threats are increasing. That's the results or consequence of the interactions.
Very interesting you point out, you talk about that point. And let me go back to you, Mr. Kulesa. This specific exercise, of course, with the U.S. involvement, but at the same time, people see very strong European identity with many European countries participating. That also leads us to another question related to NATO's identity. Europeans are looking for their own identities militarily as well. So what will be the role of NATO for the European countries? And how is that related to the European countries' military relations with the United States? That's an open question.
Well, no, just to underline, in connection to the previous discussion, that the original sin is the Russian annexation of Crimea, and this is what started the move of NATO towards the eastern flank. It should be underlined that before that, NATO as an alliance with its infrastructure, with the military units, was basically not existing along the border with Russia. In the 1990s, the alliance voluntarily said that it would not dispatch big bases and big units in the vicinity of Russia, for example, to Poland and the Baltic state. So the new exercises that we are seeing closer to Russia are only happening because of the Russian actions. Now, to your question, the situation within the Atlantic Alliance has always been difficult in the sense of the United States carrying most of the burden in terms of the military expenditures and the military the military equipment, and we've seen during the last conflicts in Afghanistan and in Libya that the U.S. Involvement is indispensable. The Americans have always called the European allies to spend more on defense, to spend wiser on defense. Some countries started to indeed spend more and more wisely after the Russian actions, especially the countries which are closer to Russia. But overall, unfortunately, we don't see any major changes in, for example, Germany, France, or Spain, or Italy. These are the countries that still spend relatively less on defense than they should be. So the whole idea of European identity in security and defense, unfortunately, is still a hollow shell. We still need the Americans to keep us all together, and in a sense give some muscle to the NATO brand.
Mr. Rathke, though, how much can the U.S. do now for your European allies, even within the NATO system? We understand the U.S. President Barack Obama, during his speech at the UN General Assembly earlier last week, he talked about the U.S. can now be able to handle all of the crises of the world on its own. Obviously, U.S. want to have others to join in as well. So how much do you think U.S. now has the capability and efforts and time, energy to spend on elsewhere's conflict, given what is already happening in the Middle East?
Well, I think if you look at the U.S. commitment to Europe and to transatlantic security, it's beyond question that the U.S. Remains committed and will remain central to stability and security in Europe. This has been the case since the end of the Second World War, and so for over 70 years now, the U.S. has been directly involved. The U.S. is a member of NATO, and what you've seen over the last year, as Russia has raised greater challenges and threats to the European security order, the U.S. has been responding to that, including with additional funds for training and exercise activity like we see now, and greater participation of U.S. troops in NATO exercises, where thousands are participating alongside NATO allies and NATO partners and international organizations in exercise Trident Juncture. So I think that the U.S. commitment to security in Europe is unshakable, and it will remain that way, frankly, because the U.S. has in its NATO allies its strongest partners for international security.
I see. Mr. Yang, it was after the Cold War started that NATO has become a system subscribed by many. But now the Cold War has long ended, even though Russia still is being perceived by some in the Western countries as the enemy or the opponent. Having said that, though, what is going to be, from your perspective as an observer, the value of NATO in the future? Is